Okay, so today we're going to talk about progressivism and the presidency. And if you think about it, the progressive movement is going to start on a local level. You have people like Lincoln Steffens and Upton Sinclair and some of these folks who are Robert La Follette, who are starting on a local level trying to fix local problems. Jane Addams creates the Hull House to help immigrants, settlement houses. And so they start on the local level. And then what starts to happen is kind of like with the Grange and the populist movement, it starts to move up to state politics. Governors get elected, state legislatures get elected, and from there we start to see it explode into a national movement. And we're going to see three presidents that are collectively referred to as the progressive presidents: Teddy Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, and Woodrow Wilson. So 1901 to 1920 is the time frame that we're looking at, and we're going to look at progressivism on the national level. So don't write the black part, don't worry about that, but Teddy Roosevelt comes in, and we have talked about in class sort of how he got to be president through McKinley's assassination and all of those things. But he is very much a progressive. He was a reformer in New York. He was governor. He was police commissioner. And so the political bosses who didn't want reformers around kicked him upstairs to the White House as vice president. And then he becomes president when McKinley gets killed. But he's known as the trust buster. He's going to go after monopolies. But he looks at monopolies as some are good, some are bad, some benefit society, some take away from society. And so he's not going to go after all monopolies. He will target John D. Rockefeller primarily because Ida Tarbell had exposed Rockefeller's business practices, and Roosevelt had seen that, and it was politically expedient to go after Rockefeller and try to break him up. So he is a trust buster. He promises people a square deal. Now, what he means by a square deal is basically this. When I say I believe in a square deal, I do not mean to give every man the best hand. If the cards do not come to any man, or if they do come and he has not got the power to play them, that's his affair. All I mean is that there shall be no crookedness in the dealing. So in other words, we're not going to use the government to pull people up out of poverty through payments, through checks, through unemployment, through welfare, through food stamps, any of that. We're not there yet. What we're talking about here is Teddy Roosevelt says, I want the working class to have a fair shake. They can't compete with the political power and monetary power of the Rockefellers, Carnegies, and Vanderbilts. So we need, like I said the other day, we need a referee. We need the government to come in because they are the most powerful thing we have to combat Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Vanderbilt, and J.P. Morgan. So the government is going to come in under Teddy Roosevelt and play referee. We're going to pass some laws to make sure that the people and the working class are not at a disadvantage when trying to compete with Rockefellers. Again, not a monetary handout. It's regulation. It's referee. We're going to make sure that the working class has a chance to play the game. So looking at Teddy Roosevelt, one of the first things that comes on the scene as president for him to sort of put this square deal into place is a coal strike in 1902. United Mine Workers went on strike in May of 1902. For 5 months, the mine owners refused to sit down and talk to the coal miners. The coal miners wanted to basically reduce hours from 10 hours a day to 9 hours a day. They wanted a 20% pay raise, safer work environment, and they wanted the right to organize a labor union. So for 5 months, they refused to talk to each other. So in October, winter's coming. Schools are being threatened with closure because they don't have coal to heat their schools. Hospitals are being threatened to shut down because they don't have coal to heat the hospitals. So people were in danger. The public good was at risk. So Teddy Roosevelt steps in, calls the owners of the coal mines and the mine leaders, the labor leaders, into the White House, sits them down and begins to have a conversation with them. He gets very frustrated because the coal mine owners don't want to sit down and talk. He said if he hadn't been president and didn't have to worry about the dignity of the office, he would have thrown one of the coal mine owners out the window, grabbed them by the pants and tossed them out the White House window. But he said, I have to respect the dignity of the White House and the presidency. So he calls them in, sits them down, and says essentially this: if you coal mine owners don't negotiate with the coal mine workers, then I'm going to use the government and my power as president to shut down the coal mines. And the government will basically come in and take over the coal mines and operate them. We'll put soldiers down there running and operating the coal mines, and you business owners won't get any money out of it. When he threatened that, the coal mine owners finally said, all right, we'll sit down and we'll talk. And they negotiated, they compromised, they gave the coal mine workers a 10% raise, reduced their hours from 10 to 9 hours a day, but refused to give them the right to organize labor unions. Coal mine workers agreed to the terms, everybody went back to work. This man, George F. Baer, said workers would be cared for not by the labor agitators, but by the Christian men to whom God in His infinite wisdom has given the country and the property interests of this country. In other words, gospel of wealth. It's going to be the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, and the Vanderbilts who are going to take care of the laboring class, not the labor agitators like Eugene V. Debs. So what happens is Roosevelt says we need a government agency to sort of help these people negotiate. So they create the Department of Labor and Commerce. At that point it was one department, today it's two. We broke it up into two. As you look through your AMSCO books and your textbooks, go through and look at the Elkins Act, the Hepburn Act, and the Northern Securities case, and make sure you know what those are. All three of those deal with railroads and regulating railroads, but get specifics from both of those. Just real quick, the Northern Securities case, J.P. Morgan was creating a monopoly of railroads up in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Washington State, Idaho, and the government came in and sued them under the Sherman Antitrust Act, which was passed in 1890, and was used, or intended to be used to break up monopolies. And so the government came in under the Northern Securities case and sued J.P. Morgan, went to the Supreme Court, and to everybody's shock, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the government and forced the Northern Securities Company to dissolve its interest and split up the railroads. That shocks Wall Street because now we're seeing the government in this progressive era start to take the side of the laborers and the common man and take a position against big business. And so that was kind of a shock for Wall Street.